So, Return of the Jedi. For many years, everyone always used to bash this movie, then people started liking it. I guess it came down to two things: the fact that the prequels were far worse, and the fact that a whole generation grew up with this movie, and we accepted it as an official part of the trilogy, even if it was the weakest. Now, in order to review this, let me just mention a few things about The Empire Strikes Back. That movie left a lot of things open-ended. Luke had to interrupt his Jedi training to fight Vader and get the big news. Han Solo was frozen and captured by the enemy. And Yoda revealed there is another. With all of those things, you could have kept this series going for a while. But from what I've heard in reviews and stuff, everyone sort of felt that Jedi should be the last one. The actors had only signed on for 3 movies, and they were all pretty anxious to move on to other stuff. And Lucas was understandably exhausted after Empire. Also, Gary Kurtz left the series. So, the general attitude throughout this movie is, let's just make one more and be done with it. And you see that throughout the film. Now, the movie's divided into 4 sections, basically a prologue and then a 3-act story structure. So, the first half hour or so is the Jabba the Hutt sequence, where Han is rescued. This sequence is fun from a fantasy perspective, but it just feels so unrelated to the main plot of the trilogy. I've heard that supposedly they wanted to kill off Han Solo and kill him off early in the movie to really throw audiences off. It would have added a lot of weight to the story. It's a shame they didn't, because this sequence does seem just a little too lighthearted. The next half hour or so is the traditional first act of a story where everything is set up. Now here's where you see how they really start tacking on closure to each plotline. For example, Luke goes back to Yoda, and even though his training was interrupted in the last movie, Yoda now says, "You're done. You just need to face Vader again, and then you'll be a Jedi. That's it." And then, even though he was never sick at all in the last movie, Yoda just dies, conveniently at that moment. And then Obi-Wan's ghost appears and gives us this very contrived explanation about how the other that Yoda had been talking about is actually Leia, Luke's sister, a revelation that really comes out of nowhere and doesn't even do that much. So you see how all those plot lines are very quickly wrapped up. Meanwhile, the Empire is building another Death Star and the Emperor will be on it, so all our heroes have to do is destroy the Death Star again and they'll win for good. And so a team is sent out to knock out the force field. Guess who's on that team but our 6 heroes who are always together. So now you start to see what I mean. The whole story of this film is minimal and it's just designed to get you to the climax. That's all. The third section of the film is just Ewoks, also known as filler. That's it. They needed to make the movie a half hour longer, so they had our heroes have a few misadventures with the Ewoks. Finally comes the last act. Lando leads an attack against the Death Star. You know, I really like Lando, but he already experienced his full character arc in Empire. Here, they just brought him back, and I do enjoy seeing him again. They don't even make him a big part of the main story. So anyway, his attack on the Death Star slightly remakes the ending of the first movie. And finally, we have the scene between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. This is a good scene. It's arguably the only real plot point of the movie that everything else was making space for. Here you get a full culmination of this plotline. And as others before me have said, Mark Hamill does give his best performance of the entire trilogy in this sequence. Now, I always found it a little corny that Vader turns good at the last moment. I heard in the original script he was going to kill the Emperor so he could be Emperor himself and then they both die or something like that. I think I would have liked that better. There, Vader would be doing the heroic thing but for selfish reasons. But I understand that Star Wars is meant to feel like a fairy tale and they don't want to have moral ambiguity like that. The end of the movie with the Ewoks celebrating definitely pays homage to the 7 Samurais ending, as our 3 fallen heroes look on the celebration of the natives. And by the way, I like both versions of this scene, the Ewok music and the victory celebration montage in the special editions. Both versions have their charms. So, all in all, Return of the Jedi is weak, and I wish they could have developed more story, but as I said, At least it has all the original characters in it, and it does succeed in bringing closure to the story. I've come to accept it as a classic, which I don't think I'll ever say about the prequels. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go watch The Empire Strikes Back.